Hello everyone and welcome to Big Rock Moto. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I've owned my 2024 BMW R1300GS for about 4 months, and today I'm going to tell you, as an owner of this bike, the things I really like about it and some of the things I don't like quite as much about it. And then I'm going to end by talking about why I've decided to keep this bike, meaning that I really like it and I'm going to keep it for myself for the foreseeable future. And I'm going to talk about why that is. All right, you know, there's been so much internet chatter out there about the new GS. The styling has been polarizing and controversial. There have been a few random isolated reports of reliability issues with, like, there was a relay, I think, and then there was one other small thing, and some, you know, sensationalist type people out there try to make a big deal out of these little things. But, like, look, it's a first year of a new model. Of course there's going to be a couple little bugs on such a high-tech bike. It affected a very small number of units, and whatever problems there were, BMW's already taken care of. In the vast majority of cases, there might be a few isolated instances, but overall there doesn't seem to be any major reliability issues with the new GS. And most of the owners out there, and I am part of the owners groups online, the vast majority of the owners, probably 95%, are super happy with their bikes, including myself. So just sort of an antidote to the sensationalist crap reporting that's out there. There's some YouTube channels in particular that are just putting out, just, sorry to say it, but just trash videos about trying to badmouth the bike. And I don't know what's behind it, but just be aware that's out there. Now, in my review today, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I don't like about the bike, but they're going to be a more balanced perspective. All right, now having said that, I realized I should talk about the Vario luggage. BMW offers a factory luggage option called the Varios. They're plastic cases. They're fine. They've been fine in the past on previous models. However, there was a recall on the Vario cases, something with the mounts that wasn't quite safe. So there's just been all these issues with the factory Vario luggage. It doesn't seem to affect the hard metal pannier boxes if you get those. And of course, you have a lot of aftermarket options, which that's what I do. I use Moscow Moto, SW Motec, Rig Gear. I have all different luggage, soft and hard, that I use. I don't typically like to go with the factory luggage, and just kind of reinforces that. I know you do get the central locking feature with the button with the Vario cases, because now they're electrified on the GS like they are in the RT, but I would just stay away from the factory luggage with all the recalls and everything. But that is one thing that's been going around that may have contributed to some of the negative reception out there. All right, so I want to get into what are the things that I really like about the bike. I'm just going to start going through my list here. So, and this isn't any particular order. One of the things I love about the bike, so if you saw Fortnite, the popular YouTube channel, did a short video on the 1300, I wouldn't call it a review because it wasn't. It was just a very short little video with his usual high production value, which gets a lot of clicks, and he wants you to click into the video. That's great, nothing wrong with that. But what really wasn't a review, he talked about the adaptive ride height and how you should avoid that because you should just learn, do practice drills or something to that effect. I really don't agree with that at all. The adaptive ride height on this model is phenomenal, and it is a game changer. And it, in my opinion, even for someone at my height, 5'10" or 1.78 meter, this is just, I can't even tell you how much I like this feature, because here's the thing. Whenever the bike is stopped at a standstill, the bike is really low. And I showed the seat heights and I showed how this works in the other video a few episodes ago. But because it's these are pretty large, heavy motorcycles, having that super low seat height when you're at a stop or very low speeds is a total game changer. Makes the bike feel smaller, lighter, more compact, easier to live with every day in every situation, off-road, on-road. I cannot say enough good things about it. And then when you're riding the bike is at full suspension height to give you the best performance. So it's such a sensible feature. It makes so much sense. It works in the real world. It is seamless. You never know what's happening. It's better than the Harley-Davidson system because, unlike the Harley, on this bike, the whole bike lowers down, and it lowers more than that system does. On the Harley, it just lowers the rear a little bit. Ducati has a system, but you have to manually press a button. So to me, that's not automatic anything if I have to press buttons to do it. This bike, it works so well. BMW did a great job with it, and I would highly, highly recommend spending the whatever it is, $600 or whatever, and check that option. Now you do give up sport suspension, which is BMW shouldn't call it sport suspension, they should call it off-road suspension. You get a taller suspension, stiffer springs, but you lose the adaptive ride height capability. I would not do that, because with the bike this tall and heavy already, for people of average height, get the adaptive ride height. I promise you, you're going to like it. Plus, it gives you that center stand assist feature where the bike lifts up the preload to help you get it on the center stand. So don't miss that option. It is one of my absolute favorite things about this bike. All right, next thing I really love about it, a lot of these next points are going to be about the technology of the bike. The radar, the front and rear radar systems. I really like them, and here's why. The front radar system gives you adaptive cruise control. When you come up behind traffic on cruise control, this will sense that traffic, the speed it's going, whether it's speeding up or slowing down or staying at the same speed. It will keep that gap behind the traffic. It works for motorcycles as well as cars and trucks. It is a wonderful feature to have. If you've used it in a car, you know what I'm talking about. If on a bike, it's just as useful, if not more, because if you're just inattentive for a second or whatever, it also, you know, like if there's a traffic slowing, the bike will slow down for you and keep that gap. But I don't recommend being inattentive, obviously. So when you're using it, you know, it's just keeping that gap. And man, on long journeys with a lot of traffic, you know, I live in Southern California. The traffic's horrible anywhere I go. So phenomenal feature to have on a bike that's designed for long distance travel and, you know, commuting, going to work, riding on the highway. Man, I really, you know, I have this on my car and my wife's car, and now I have it on a bike, and I don't ever want to go back. Now the rear radar, what that does, the rear radar gives you blind spot monitoring. It works really well, so you get a little light in your mirror that tells you that there's somebody in your blind spot. So if you're thinking about changing lanes and you don't quite do a good enough head check, and you should still do a head check, but it gives you that warning in the mirror, that bright yellow light that says, hey, somebody's in your blind spot. So to me, things like that and things like the front radar and the other safety tech that this bike has, like some of the collision mitigation or pre-warning and things like that, it helps reduce and prevent accidents, and it makes riding less tiring and more enjoyable, so I'm all for it. The next thing kind of tying into that is the way that all the safety technology on this bike works and all the electronics. It's not intrusive and it's fairly easy to use. It doesn't seem to get in the way of your riding. There's a couple little exceptions to that sometimes depending on your riding style, which is if you're on adaptive cruise and you like change lanes and you're kind of behind a car, it might slow down too abruptly, or if somebody cuts in front of you, it might slow down more than you want. Now you can adjust the following distance in a computer, you know, there on your dash. But there are some instances where that could be the case. But overall, like the way you adjust the suspension, the way you change your ride modes, the safety tech is pretty user-friendly and not intrusive, including things like the hill start control. And let's put a little video right now of that hill start control.
One of the other things that Ryan Fortnite said in his short little, I don't even want to call it a review, but his little video on the 1300 was, you know, that the electronics are intrusive, and I totally categorically disagree with that. I think they're phenomenal. So like on the hill start assist, for example, and I've showed other electronics and other clips, but on the hill start assist, so like on this hill here, see how it's pretty steep and I'm sliding backwards? So the bike has to be running. I just squeeze the front brake, and now even if I'm in neutral, you see there, neutral? Now I can sit here, do what I need to do, whatever it is, stay here parked for a minute, and the bike is holding itself in place. I love this feature. I use it all the time, off-road and on-road. Now when it's time to go, he said something like, oh, it's too jerky or whatever. No, that's completely wrong. All you do is simply take off. I mean, it's totally seamless, so I have no idea what the heck he's talking about. And I just think it's unfortunate that a channel that has such a wide of reach as his would say things about the bike that are just, in my opinion, just false.
Okay, the next thing I love about the bike, and this has been true of all the big GSs for a long time, I really like the Telelever suspension, and here's why. When I'm hard on the brakes, trail braking into a corner on the street, I don't have the motorcycle diving down in the front end. I just like that. It's just more confidence inspiring, it's more comfortable, it feels great. It makes you be able to use more of the brakes, and It's just really nice. And then off-road, the reason I like the Telelever, there's good and bad to the Telelever off-road. The bad is it can feel a little bit disconnected from the steering, and it doesn't like square edge bumps like sharp rocks as much, although it's better on the 1300 for sure, and these lighter wheels that I have make it better. But the upside is, under braking, it's completely flat. Like downhill braking, off-road in the dirt on this bike is so much better than any other adventure bike because the linked brakes combined with the Telelever means the bike stays flat, it doesn't pitch forward and transfer the weight, and you can stop on a frickin' dime, even in the dirt, and it's so confidence inspiring. The next thing I love about the new GS is the overall suspension is a huge improvement from previous bikes. There's a few things to that. You have Evo Telelever, which is a new design. You have better feel from the front end. We've talked about that. You have more adjustability now. You can fine-tune the damping adjustments in any of the suspension modes. That's phenomenal, and I use that. The other thing is you have variable rate spring. Now, it's the only motorcycle in production today that I know of that has a variable rate spring system. So it uses, and there's another YouTube channel that does better explanations than this, and I'll try to link that below, but it's got an oil circuit that connects to like another canister with another secondary spring, and it can increase the spring rate by about 20 or 30% when needed. So when you're hitting a big bump, or when you have a passenger or luggage or whatever, it can actually stiffen the spring rate and not just change the damping. That's phenomenal because that's exactly what you need to do when you have a different load, different weight, different condition where you're hitting big bumps or something. I really noticed it right away on this bike versus the outgoing bike that would kind of blow through the travel and bottom out. This one doesn't do that as much. You still can do it, but overall, the new suspension system is very, very good. Now, there is a downside to the suspension, which I'll talk about when I get into the parts that I don't like.
And Evo Paralever suspension, and you're probably aware that there's been quite a bit of talk about this adjustable spring rate which you have on the new 1300, and it is simply brilliant. And in very, very simple terms, on the old 1250, if you were a big heavy rider and you carried lots of gear and a passenger, the best way to get the most from this motorbike is to go to a suspension specialist and have a pair of springs, rear and front, matched to your weight. And if you do that, the bike does transform. It really is quite a noticeable change. So that's one thing that you would have to do on the old 1250. But on the new R1300, you don't really need to do that unless you're incredibly heavy and you carry a huge amount of gear, because the new system adjusts the spring rate by an additional 20%. So let me explain. So first off, this adaptive ride height control.
The next thing I really love about the bike is the overall wind management and the electric windshield. Now this only applies if you have the bike like I do with the electric windshield option. And I think if you're getting a 1300, I don't know why you would not get this. It's one of the best things about this bike that sets it apart from all the competition. It's the only adventure bike now that has an electric windshield. So the wind coverage for your upper body from your torso and your head is superb. When it's down, you have clean airflow. When it's all the way up, you have air going over your top of your helmet, and it's very quiet. Not quite a Goldwing, but pretty close. The ability to adjust it just from the handlebar, you don't have to reach up and turn the knob anymore. The electric windshield is a game changer. I love it, and I don't want to be without it. It's one of the best features of this bike, along with a few others. The wind protection, I would say, is similar to the GSA, the previous 1250 GSA, except the lower legs, the GSA still has that bigger tank, at least in the previous model. We don't know what the new model is going to be. They give you more like kind of coverage for your knees and your legs. You don't have as much of that here, but the upper torso and head protection is phenomenal on this, but I highly recommend getting that electric windshield option and not the smaller sport windshield that just has a little manual adjustment. If you get that, I don't know what to tell you. It's not going to be the same experience. Tires on an adventure bike, it's such a hard thing to figure out, right? So my bike came with the off-road tire package, which are the Metzeler Karoo 4 tires. You can probably see here in the video that after these tires have about 900 miles on them, and the center is very flattened out. So it has a very flat profile. I've worn through probably 2/3 of the tread in just under 1,000 miles. That seems like pretty poor tire wear to me. Now I will say that the Karoo 4s do perform well, both on and off road. They're a bit noisy, but I think the big thing is the tire wear is not really acceptable for me, just because I want to be able to take trips, and I could probably squeeze 2,000 miles out of the Crew 4, but that's just not enough. Now, Dunlop also sent this other tire here that I'm holding. This is a Road Smart 4. This is a set of pure road tires, no adventure abilities at all, or off-road abilities. I put these on and tested the bike with the Road Smarts. What a phenomenal transformation that was for a road machine. I mean, the bike just felt like a dream in terms of handling on the pavement. Love these tires, speak very highly of them. But, you know, the thing with the GS, part of the reason I have a GS and not a Goldwing or an RT or a Harley, is that I can go off-road. And unfortunately, having a tire like this just really puts even dirt roads or gravel roads kind of out of the equation, the way I like to ride. So although these are a great road tire, I'm just gonna stick to an adventure tire. Now the tires that I've got on the bike right now are the tires that are my preferred tires for a GS. These are the Moto's Tractionator GPS. I've used these on other bikes. I really like these tires, and I've tested all the 50/50 tires like the Trailmax Missions, the Trailmax Raids, the Mitas EO7 tires. The GPS are my favorite. They have a great combination of on-road, they're smooth, quiet, handle well in the twisties, really long wear, really long tread life. Off-road, they're decent, not great, but decent. You know, just avoid mud and snow. So for how I use my GS, the GPS tires are perfect. Other tires I like, the Dunlop Trailmax Raid, I like those, but they don't have the life of these GPSs. The Trailmax Missions have really good life, but I think the GPSs grip a little bit better than the Trailmax Missions. The Mitas tires are pretty good, I like those, but you don't have the tread life that you get on these GPS. There's a lot of other ones I've tried, but I really like these tires. All right, the next thing I love about this bike is the overall street handling and road performance of the bike is really quite exceptional. I've spent 2 days at Yamaha Champ School on a racetrack with the bike, did exceptionally well, at least for my standard anyway. I was on the factory Karoo 4 off-road tires. That was an added challenge, but the instructors were quite impressed with what the bike was still able to do, even with knobby tires. I'll put some footage here from the Champ School, but that was a great experience, and I highly recommend Champ School, by the way. So the overall road performance is really, really great. I've talked about the tires, you know, the different tires that I've used and how that affects the road performance, and I'll probably cut here to a little bit of clip of some of the road riding.
You know, riding this bike on a curvy road, I don't know how to say this, it's almost too easy to ride fast. Like I can do this one-handed and just fly through these corners. There's just something about the chassis and the suspension and the brakes and the torque of the motor. Like, you can cruise, like it feels like I'm cruising, but I'm actually going pretty quick. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I mean, I think I like it because it's so confident and so confidence inspiring to go quickly without really feel like you're going that quickly. And if I need to stop all of a sudden, man, the brakes are amazing, and an anti-dive, all the safety technology working for me. It really is, for a sport touring bike, like even if you never rode off-road, this would still be a great motorcycle to purchase for road riding, because it's one of the best road bikes, if not the best road bike, if you consider everything, comfort, technology, performance, all that. Maybe the best road bike I've ever tested. And I mean, I'd have to think about that a bit more, because like I really like the Multistrada from Ducati. That's very close with this bike, but I think with the changes that they've made now on the 1300 and some of the benefits that you get, you know, the shaft drive, the Telelever suspension, the electric windshield, man, I don't know, this bike just has so many distinct advantages. And now you notice that now that they've fixed the quick shifter is very good. It's not perfect, but it's very, very good and pretty competitive with other bikes now, so that's great. Transmission is also much better, just the transmission itself. the way it shifts. I really have to say, I think this is in contention for the best road going motorcycle I've ever tested, and that doesn't even factor in its off-road capabilities.
Next thing I really like about the bike is that it has pretty impressive off-road ability for what it is. You know, you look at something so big and heavy and also expensive, by the way, but it's legitimately good off-road, even though it really has no rights to be. So let's cut to a clip of that right now.
No, it's funny. I like all the angles of this bike except from the very front. So as long as I come around like to this angle, I like that look, the side look, the back. I like the angles and the shapes of it, but I still can't get used to this headlight. Really, it's not a deal breaker for me, but I still don't like it. So let's take the GS on this kind of rutted out, a little bit more challenging kind of Jeep road. It's not that bad. Got my tire pressure. So on these GPS tires that I'm using, the Moto's GPS, they're one of the few tires that I will air down for dirt riding, because with the center strip, if you have a little lower pressure, it helps engage all of these good biting edges all through the sides. So BMW wants you to run 42, 36. I'm running like 35 and like 30. But I'll put the pressures back up if I'm doing a bunch of highway. But that really does help with the GPS tires, especially in the back. So there's some inside baseball for you there. So riding off-road, like I've got my windshield down. So the electronics are so simple on these. You know, you can do it while you're riding too. You don't have to stop. So Enduro Pro is a nice setup. I still wish they had like a slip control that was more configurable, but Enduro Pro does a pretty good job if you have like a 50-50 tire managing the traction control, and then it turns off my rear ABS, leaves my front on, and I can achieve incredible braking just by squeezing the front lever because it's linked brakes. So the off-road braking on this bike is so much better than any other adventure bike, even the smaller adventure bikes. Let's see, what else? That's about it. And then, so yeah, the adaptive ride height, when you're in the enduro modes, you have to choose lower high. It's not going to do the self-lowering thing. But if you do turn the bike off, it does actually lower. But then when you just come to a stop, the engine's running, it's going to stay at the height you set it at. Another thing I'll say about the GS, the clutch, the hydraulic clutch that they have, has such fine control. Like I can just go like 0.01 miles an hour and crawl along. The clutch has such good control. And even if you want to do one finger, I'm a 2 fingers on the clutch person and 1 or 2 fingers on the brake. 2 fingers probably. It has such good control, so I really like the hydraulic clutch. This bike is very hard to stall, and it has an incredible slow speed capabilities when you need that. So that's really good. And then a suspension setting. So just like I showed you in the first ride, I think I was playing with it. I found that going to -2 damping for enduro damping is what I preferred. It just seemed to make the suspension really nice and active and plush, but still had really good hold up for the bigger hits. So that variable, let me show you through these ruts here, like that's really impressive that I'm able to ride a 550 plus pound bike that quick through. A suspension's pretty impressive, and now that you have that fine tuning control that they've added, which you didn't have before, that's phenomenal. I really like what they did there. So the thing with riding a big GS off-road is it really helps to stand up on a big heavy bike like this, especially in slower speeds and more kind of technical riding. When you have obstacles and things to deal with, having a good set of tires is nice. But the bike is much more controllable than you would think for such a big heavy motorcycle. Really well balanced. It doesn't like to be rushed. It's not a bike that you want to ride, super fast and go off jumps. It's just too heavy, and it just can't cope with that. I do feel like they've improved the front end feel a little bit. It doesn't feel quite as vague. It doesn't feel quite as vague as the previous ones did in terms of the front end feel. It's a little bit better. And of course, we've talked about that on the road as well. They've improved that for the road as well. But some of the biggest improvements for the 1300 for off-road riding, I think the biggest one is the improved suspension. I would say that's probably the biggest for me. And the bike does feel smaller and more compact and lighter, even though it isn't that much lighter. It just has that feel because of the mass centralization that they've done by moving the transmission and kind of pushing that weight more centralized. You know, I'm always impressed at how easy it is to pick your way through, you know, somewhat difficult, well, this isn't that difficult, but, you know, obstacles on such a big heavy bike. It has such good balance, and you can really slow down and approach things as you want, and then kind of get your way through them. But yeah, this is not a bike you're going to go tearing, rallying through the desert on like you would on a Touareg 660 or an 890 rally. But it's competent, it's just not fast, if that makes some sense. And you could still have fun. I mean, this is a tight, twisty road with a lot of ruts and things. And the more open, fast terrain, it's also fun, but I would just caution you, you know, to keep yourself in check, because you can get going pretty fast, and this is a lot of weight and a lot of bike if you sort of have any sort of accident. You can definitely use all the suspension travel, and because it's a predictive or dynamic suspension where it's sensing what's going on and reacting, you can surprise it, catch it off guard, because it can't see a jump, or it doesn't see the road ahead. It just reacts to what it's sensing. But you know, ooh, okay, really helps to stand up on this bike more than any other. I don't know why that is. It's funny to say this, but this bike actually has better feel than my Tiger 900 Rally Pro. It has better low speed feel. I think you can ride the Tiger a little faster maybe, but this has better low speed feel, and it feels like a lighter motorcycle. It actually feels lighter in the handling and stuff than, ooh, that's a good one. See, this is where the cylinder heads, see, you gotta watch on the really narrow stuff, because the cylinder heads do stick out quite a bit. That is kind of a built-in limitation with a bike with the boxer motor. But I was saying that this bike actually has a lighter ride feel in a lot of situations than an Africa Twin or a Tiger. It doesn't feel as good as a Touareg or an 890, but anyway. I enjoy going uphill more. It's just a bit more fun. And then kind of a real world drop test. Let's say you kind of have a little oopsie, and you know, well, I'm going to turn the bike off because it'll call the SOS thing. So see, because it doesn't fall over all the way, you have a huge advantage in lifting it up. For such a heavy bike, it's exceptionally, you know, easy to lift because it doesn't fall flat. So I'd rather lift this any day than a lot of the smaller adventure bikes out there. Whew. Still gets my heart rate going though. Another thing that makes this bike just easy to use every day in terms of off-road stuff as an adventure bike, like stuff that actually matters in the real world, it remembers the settings that you have. So unlike a lot of bikes where you have to go through menus and do all these damn button presses to get things back with the traction control and ABS, the BMW doesn't do that. You start the bike and it's in the mode where you left it. My rear ABS is off, my traction control is set how I want, and I can just go ride. I don't have to F around with menus and switch buttons and settings, and I just can't tell you how good that is. Now, if you turn traction control completely off, it is going to reset that. But beyond that, which I rarely do on this bike because the Enduro Pro is so good. So anyway, just another thing I wanted to share.
Okay, the next thing I love is that the heated grips and the heated seats get properly warm. They get hot. Unlike some bikes where the heated grips don't really seem to work well, these really do. They will roast your hands. So something I appreciate. Now, I don't like how to turn the stuff on and off, and I'll get to that in the negatives. Next up on my list of things I love is the performance of the headlight. Now, we've all made a lot about, the styling of the headlight is very controversial, and I don't really like it either, to be honest. But I will say this, like I rode this bike at night and I turned off my extra Cyclops lights to see how the stock headlight was, and my gosh, it's gotta be one of the best, if not the best, motorcycle headlight, factory headlights I've ever seen. The illumination is extremely good. So, there's a benefit to that weird design, which is that you could almost ride this bike at night, even at higher speeds, without extra lights. It is that good. Next thing I really like about the new GS, I really like how BMW now gave us the option of the forged Enduro wheels, which I have. I've talked about these. I've been testing the durability, no problem so far. Knock on wood or knock on seat. Why do I like them? Well, one, the thing is, I don't like spoke wheels. I don't know why people like spoke wheels, right? You've got all this maintenance, the spokes come loose, you can still bend them and break them, although people say they're more flexible. They're almost impossible to clean properly. Tire changes are more difficult with that outer rim with the spokes coming through. I prefer a mag wheel or a cast wheel. The forged wheels, BMW says they're as strong, comparable in strength for off-roading as a spoked wheel. A lot of people doubt that claim. We don't really know. We just need more time to see if that's going to be true. They're so much lighter. I forget the weight figure. It's like 2 kilograms or something, or what is it? It's like 5 pounds or 6 pounds less rotating mass. So that's unsprung weight, people. So that's weight that the suspension is working against. That's weight that going through the bumps. It's rotational weight for handling. So getting that much weight off your wheel set is a transformational change in the handling. So I really like that option. I think it's worth $1,000 that they charge. Buy the wheel warranty if you're going to get them, just to be sure. BMW does have a wheel coverage thing, at least here in the USA. I bought that. So I really, really like them, and I would get them again. Long-term durability is still a question mark. Next thing I really, really like, huge positive, they've dramatically improved the transmission and also the quick shifter. It's not as good as some of the competition, but it's getting much closer. It's not the clunky, kind of jerky quick shifter and transmission that some of the older GSs had. They've been getting better each generation, but I think this is the biggest transformation they've ever done. Pretty slick shifting, the quick shifter works quite well. Still a little clunky from between first and second. I think that boxer motor and the shaft drive, there's just some clunkiness to that, but huge improvement on the transmission, and the quick shifter really makes the bike much more fun to ride. All right, now for the stuff that I don't really like. A lot of YouTubers will make videos, and I used to be guilty of this, and sometimes still am, where it's like, oh, I hate the 5 things I hate about XYZ. It's kind of a clickbaity, sensational title. I'd like to avoid that because these things are not things I hate, they're just kind of annoyances, so let's put it that way. But you need to be aware of them if you're considering spending $30,000, which is about what one of these costs with all the options. So first thing is the control interface, and we've touched on this, other people have too. First of all, for almost 30 grand, come on, there's no backlighting on the switchgear, that's ridiculous. The second thing is they need to have a couple more buttons. They need to redesign their switchgear or have a couple more buttons, because the problem is there's so much to control now with a new bike. The electric windshield, the adaptive cruise control. There's a lot of things we need to control, and they only really give us one button to do that. The multi-select thing where you have to tell it what you want to control, or the hamburger button that we kind of call it, and then you can hold it down and get a secondary setting. So I have my primary setting on the windshield. My secondary setting is my heated grips and heated seat, which I don't really need in the summer, so I could probably change that. But they need to add some buttons here because it's too annoying to have to go into the menu to change the setting of that multi-controller button to get to what you want to do. So I don't like that. We don't have a dedicated button for heated grips or heated seat. We don't have a dedicated button for turning off the traction control. Those are super frustrating, considering that some of the previous GSs, you had that traction control switch on the handlebar, you had that heated grip switch on the handlebar. I don't like that going away and going into the menu system or the multi-control. I think that's dumb. And BMW, if you're listening, please do something about the interface. I just don't think it's very good. Now, having said that, is it a deal breaker? No, because you can program the 2 things you use most often, and that's good enough for most people. Most people aren't riding off-road anyway, so you probably don't care about the traction control. So it's not a huge thing, but I just think for a bike this expensive, that needs to be improved. All right, the next downside, and this is a really, really big one that we need to discuss, and it's a tough thing to talk about because it's such a personal thing, but overall, I feel the GS now is actually a little bit less comfortable than before. And, you know, a lot of people have talked about this. This is the subject of a lot of discussion out there. So there's a few things I think contributing to that. The number one thing I don't like about the 1300 is the seat is not as good as the previous GSs. I had a 1200 GS, I had a 1250 GSA, and I had a standard 1250 GS. I had comfort seats on all of them from BMW, and all those seats were exceptionally good. Not the case now. I've got the comfort seats on here, and I don't know what it is, if it's the density of the foam or the shape, they're not as comfortable, and I get seating discomfort after about 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours of riding. I don't like that. I'm paying too much money for this bike to have an uncomfortable seat, and the previous seat was a lot better. So seating could be personal. Maybe there's some people that will like this seat better than the old one, but I just find that to be the case. Now,
including the paddle assembly and all that mechanism inside that seat, they've got reduced space for foam. So when you compare the new comfort seat with the comfort seat of the 1250, it is very different because on the old 1250 we had a height adjustment, so we could have the seat at 870 or its standard height of 850, and of course we could also then move the front of the seat, the back of the seat, and we could have various different positions, which then in terms of seat designers left them lots of room to get lots of dual density super comfortable foam on the seat. So for me and my wife, we both feel that the comfort seats on the 1250 are superior in terms of the comfort and the support they provide compared to the 1300.
Other thing is seating position. I'm really good with the reach to the bars. I think that's good. The leg room seems to be a little bit less. I feel like my legs are a little tighter. I feel like the pegs are a little bit higher, a little bit further back. I can't confirm that's true, but it feels that way. So I feel a little bit more cramped in my lower body, and I get a little bit more aching in my legs and knees on this bike than I did on my previous GSs. I do have lower foot pegs from Black Dog. That helped, but it still could be a little bit better. You know, for as much as this bike costs and as how comfortable as the previous bike was, I feel like they missed the mark a little bit there. It's still comfortable even compared to most adventure bikes. It's still very high on the list, but it took a slight step backwards, and I don't like that. All right, next thing I don't like, I talked about what I liked about the suspension before, but there's one small thing I don't like, and this seems to carry over from the previous GS as well. On the rear shock, I feel like the rebound damping sometimes is just like, doesn't have control. Like you feel like the rear of the bike's kind of like bouncing or rocking up and down, and you can kind of play with the modes and the settings to kind of get that out sometimes. It doesn't always do it. I notice it more on like on twisty pavement when there's like bumps and I feel the rear end kind of like porpoising. I don't know what's going on there. Overall, the suspension is a big improvement from the previous bikes, but I did want to point that out, and other journalists or other reviewers have noted that as well. The next downside for me, and I think I touched on this in the off-road segment, is they didn't give us an adjustable, well, okay, let me rephrase that. They didn't give us a highly tunable slip control system. They should have done that. For as much as this thing costs, for as much other tech as this has, where is the adjustable slip control system like you have on Honda, like you have on KTM, like you have on Ducati, with a 6, 7, or 9, up to 9 level slip control system for the rear traction control for riding off-road? That is so incredibly useful. And this bike, it gives you just three settings for traction control. It gives you off, which you have to go into the menu now to do, which is horrible. Enduro Pro, which is a decent setting for off-road without a lot of drama. Enduro, which is really restrictive, really intrusive. And then you have the road and the rain settings. But where's the slip control adjuster? Go study KTM's rally mode with their 1 through 9. I'd say that's the benchmark, but the Honda system is good on the Africa Twin, and the Ducati system is good on the Desert X. So that should really be improved here. The next downside for me, and this is a personal thing, but I know a lot of people agree, is I can't get used to the styling from the headlight on the front end. Something is just really off with the headlight design and that big radar sensor up front. it just looks awkward to me, and it's not a bike that I want to really look at from the front. I like the profile from the side and the back and from the front quarter. You know, when you're, again, I keep saying this, but when you have a motorcycle this expensive, it'd be nice if it was really attractive, you know, like a Ducati Multistrada or a Desert X or a Honda Africa Twin or a Tiger 900, all very attractive looking adventure bikes with good proportions. I feel like they kind of missed the boat here on that. I'm not quite sure, you know, what could be done there. I know a lot of people agree with me. Now, it's not a deal breaker because I don't sit up at night in the garage staring at my bike's headlight from the front. You know, I ride the bike or I look at it on the side, take a picture from the side, but it is a downside just for me personally. All right, the next downside, and this is a big one, I left it for the end, is the cost. So we have seen an increase in price on the GS. Now, there's a lot going into this, right? I could kind of argue both sides of this equation here. So on the one hand, in BMW's favor, or kind of in their defense, there's more equipment available now. You didn't used to have forged Enduro wheels as an option. You didn't used to have a front and rear radar. You didn't used to have an electric windshield. You didn't used to have a variable rate suspension spring. So they've added content which they could say potentially justifies a price increase. The other side of that argument is, well, isn't the advantage of technology and better manufacturing processes and better economy of scale over time? The idea with that is, with consumer products, is we get a better product for about the same money adjusted for inflation. So there's like, maybe we should have gotten that extra content, or at least most of it, for a similar price adjusted for inflation that the 1250 GS used to have. So there's two sides to that. It's really hard to figure that out. Also, inflation has been, I was going to say a cuss word there, but inflation has been a real problem, right? And so that's affected this as well, worldwide inflation. So, you know, my bike, and I showed this in the previous episode, was like $28,000 plus tax and fees. It was about $31,000 out the door with the wheel warranty that I added. That doesn't include luggage or crash bars or anything, just the bike. And I got to tell you, like, that's really painful to spend that much on a motorcycle. Is it worth it? I actually think yes, because of everything I've talked about in the videos, of all the positive aspects of this bike and how much it does and how good it does in every situation. I do think it actually is worth it. At least it is for me. I can't tell you whether it's worth it for you. But man, the price is really painful, because I remember buying a 1250 GS Adventure brand new for around $25. And I remember like a 1250 GS Standard was like 22, maybe 23 at most. And now a lot of these bikes are between 26 to 30. So, I don't know. I mean, the Multistrada's right up there at that 30 grand mark as well, 28 to 30 grand mark. So it is competitive with that. But if you look at a KTM 1290, it's like 20 grand. A Tiger 1200 is like 21 grand. You could go on, but man, the price is painful. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Is the price justified, or has it just gotten out of control? All right, so we've done the pros and cons. Now, I want to talk about why I've decided to keep it as my personal bike. I mean, I did buy the bike for my personal bike, right? But I mostly bought it because, hey, it's a new model. I really want to do a bunch of videos with it. That's part of my business. But it's a huge investment. And I like GSs. This is the kind of bike that I personally want to have in my garage. So why am I deciding to keep this for the foreseeable future? Now, I know some of you are going to laugh and say, oh, he'll change his mind. Yeah, maybe. But on this one, I don't think so. One, because there's so much money involved. I've got kind of the setup I want on here with different parts. Here's why I'm keeping it, okay? I'll just try to make this simple. The GS, the big GS, it fulfills the role of 3 different motorcycles for me. So it fills basically, instead of having 3 different bikes, I can have these 3 things in one bike. Those 3 things are, number 1, a sport touring bike or a sport bike. Number 2, a long distance touring bike. And number 3, an adventure bike to do on and off-road riding. It does all 3 of those things exceptionally well. Compared to the competition, if you look at how it performs in each of those areas, the technology it has, some of the ownership aspects to it, like the low maintenance shaft drive, everything together, you look at that as a package and you say, you know what, There's a reason why it's so popular. There's a reason why it's so expensive. And there's a reason why, you know, riders who've been doing this a long time like me really always go back to this bike. So it fulfills the role of 3 bikes for me. So it kind of helps justify the price. It saves room in my garage, because I'd rather have 2 or 3 bikes to do everything than have to have 4 or 5 bikes to do everything, because to me that's a huge pain. I don't want to do that. So if I own this plus like a small adventure bike like a 690 or maybe a Touareg 660 plus an enduro bike like a 350 KTM or a Beta or something, with those 3 bikes I could do absolutely everything I want to do, because, you know, I don't do trials riding really. I don't do track days really, although I have done track days on this and I like it. I don't really do I don't like cruisers. So anyway, you get the idea. It does all those types of riding in one bike. Now, as I've said that, you might be wondering, well, why don't you just do that same idea with an adventure bike but get something smaller and lighter? Well, my argument against that is I've tried that. You know, KTM 890, Africa Twins, gosh, I've had everything, right? Whatever, Transalp, V-Strom. Here's what I'm going to say, and this might be a little controversial. All of the adventure bikes, once you get over about 500 pounds or 450 pounds even, they're all too heavy for real off-roading. They're all too heavy. They all suck off-road, basically. Once you get over that around that 500-pound mark, they're all pigs. So my argument is, if I'm going to have a pig, I want a pig that has all of the luxury and safety technology and features and long distance comfort and sport handling and electronic suspension, electric windshield. Just give me all that, because it's already going to be a pig anyway. Now, yes, a Touareg 660 is a much better off-road bike, but it is not near the road bike or touring bike that this is, not even close. So I'm going to choose my big adventure bike to be a fully loaded one. And I don't think of 50 pounds less. Like if I sell this and get an Africa Twin, yeah, it's probably 10 or 20% better off-road. The Tiger 900 is the same thing. I sold my Tiger 900 because I don't need it. Like this does off-road what I reasonably want to do on an adventure bike. 2-track, Jeep roads, dirt roads, gravel roads, nothing extreme. It does that great. And then for my road stuff, it does it great. So I don't really want one of those 500-pound adventure bikes when this is available. All right, well, I know we jammed a lot into this video. Thank you for sticking with me with all this. I appreciate it. I hope you're finding it useful and informative. I try to do the best investigative reporting or journalism that I can, combining that with the fact that I also bought this bike for myself. So I'm trying to do a lot at once, and I hope I'm doing a good job. I'm trying. Give me feedback below if you have questions, comments, concerns. Stay tuned, because the next episode on the GS is going to focus on some of the livability issues, the maintenance, like the air filter, the maintenance stuff. The headlight, we'll show the headlight performance. We'll talk more about the seating. We'll get Maggie on board. Just life with the GS, practical matters, right? So we'll talk more again about the fuel range too. So that'll be a good one. So stay tuned for that. And then there'll be, of course, more content after that, because as of now, I'm planning to keep this bike around for at least another 6 months, hopefully a couple years, fingers crossed. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. Ride safe, and I'll see you out there.